users. Um, for the last 3 years, I've been doing that here at Luciq, particularly with a focus on mobile developers. So I'm always excited to join a room full of mobile developers and mobile development leaders. And you can kind of think of this as this talk as my hot take on where mobile development is headed, particularly around AI. The one thing that I want to really settle on at the start is there's a word in this title that's really important to me, and that's experiences. And so um, we talk a lot, we're going to talk a lot about AI in this conversation. We're going to talk a lot about how AI can both help us build better apps and help us build apps better, be more effective in the way that we build mobile apps and create new experiences. But remember that AI is a useful tool, but there are things still that are quintessentially only humans can do. And a lot of that has to do with taste and building great experiences. So I really want to focus on how we can use AI and the new crop of tools and agents to both craft unique experiences and spend less time work focused on maintenance so we have more time to building great experiences for our users. So I was really intentional in using that word at in the title of this talk, and it's going to carry out throughout the conversation. Um, Before we can really talk about the future of AI, we kind of have to go through the future of mobile development. We have to talk about how we got here. And so I just want to kind of briefly go through what I see as the three phases of mobile app development. And we'll start with the first one. Lots of people think, especially for those who weren't around, that mobile app development started with the launch of the iPhone in 2007. It really started much before then. For those of you who are around, there were the precursors to mobile apps in mobile devices like the IBM personal communicator that was in 1994. The Nokia communicator, which was in 96, it actually had its own operating system that you could ostensibly program against. It had multitasking, so you could build your own apps. It didn't have a great development environment for doing that. And then in the late 90s and early 2000s, before 2007, um, we had Blackberries, which had a kind of native operating system that took Symbian even further, and then the big Windows mobile push. All of that was pushing for a richer set of experiences than just talking on your phone and dialing on your phone. A little bit was more about emulating what you could do on a computer into mobile, not necessarily thinking about the uniqueness of something mobile. That really starts to take off in with the iPhone. And while lots of people think about, well, the exciting thing about an iPhone in 2007 was the touchscreen. If you think back to that time, actually one of the most exciting things was the mobile browser. It came with Safari. And now you have this actual ability to experience the richness that you might experience on a website directly on your phone. If for those of you who are around before that time, typically a mobile browser was only showing you the text-based version of a website, almost like the tree structure of the website, not necessarily any of the graphics. The phones weren't capable of even presenting those graphics. Um, the real revolutionary thing for me in the iPhone release was that, hey, we're delivering a new way to experience what we're experiencing on the web on phone. And then yes, the touchscreen becomes a new form factor and opens up a whole different set of experiences. But that was the key thing. Notably, in 2007, there was no app store. iPhone ships no app store, no ability to program new apps against it. It wasn't until 2008 when uh, Android and then Google's acquisition of Android, they launch their kind of response to the iPhone, which was a phone I had, the HTC Dream. For those of you who remember, it's like the slide out between the two. It has a slide out keyboard and a touchscreen, so it's kind of a mixture of both. But the really exciting thing that started all of this for any of you who are mobile app developers on the call was the launch of what was called Android Market at the time, but it's now what you know as the Google Play Store. And we're all developers. The thing that was really exciting about that is at launch time, it launched with a much smoother development environment and set of SDKs. That was exactly 17 years and a week ago. And that's what really started this explosion. And that's what shifts us into phase two. That's when I think of this as like the professionalization of app delivery, where we're adding more intelligence and DevOps kind of standard capabilities. But it explodes rapidly. I think in the immediate aftermath in 2009, there were only 1,600 apps in app stores. By 2013, there were already a million, and today there's obviously hundreds of millions. This is also when we start seeing the professionalization of a class of people, developers who are specifically focused on mobile apps. So almost no mobile apps in the early 2000s to now 26 million global mobile app developers in 2023. Revenue obviously skyrockets from mobile apps in 2008, right after the launch of Android and the Play Store. Revenue was 200 million. Uh, in 2020, it was 120 billion. We also saw tools kind of start to come about for this professionalization of app development, whether that's Xcode and Android Studio or the usage of DevOps practices like device farm, CI/CD, things like progressive delivery and rollout and Fastlane. All of these start to build an ecosystem of tools for this professionalization of app delivery. Um, Around this same time in the early teens, you get companies that their entire business proposition is around their mobile app experience. Think of uh, products like Uber and Lyft. They're born for mobile. They're exclusively almost used on mobile, and they invest a lot in mobile and the experience they're delivering. One word that starts to come about is this idea of quality. And what does it mean to be a quality mobile app? That that term quality then today is now like a defined term that is part of the App Store gating for when you push a new APK to the store, you're being evaluated on its quality. Sometimes you know how the response from the gatekeeper, sometimes you don't. But this whole process starts to develop a professionalization of how we build mobile apps. This phase two, we can't ignore one of the most important components of phase two, particularly in the latter part of phase two, which is the pandemic. And a global pandemic forces people to rethink their expectations of what they can do on their phone, what they're not even just what they can do, what they're willing to do. You now see people starting to rent houses, uh, buy homes, put down payments on cars, buy airplane tickets, things that people never previously did. They now have the expectation that they can and are willing to do strictly through their phone. This coincides with, obviously, because of the pandemic, where we're spending more time at home, a significant increase in the daily consumption of our phones. So we went from spending about 3 hours a day on our phones in 2018 to 5+ hours in 2025. And what that really means, and I think this is important, especially when I talk about experiences going forward, is that most companies view their uh, mobile app no longer as like a possible alternative to web that they should mirror what you can do on web. It's becoming the primary channel for brands and companies. It's where people make decisions about what products and brands they're going to choose. And so that just forces a whole bunch of pressure on how are we doing mobile app development uh, that progresses into this phase three. And phase three is really obviously you can't have a talk in 2025 that doesn't have AI, but it really is has already significantly changed how leading companies develop mobile apps. And I think we're still have yet to see it completely change the types of experiences that we get to deliver. And frankly, I'm really excited about both of those. So let's dive a little bit deeper. In this AI era, we're shifting away from just being tool assisted to being agent led. We're increasingly seeing that, whether that's, I'm sure many of you are using code assistants in your IDEs, and I'm sure you're evolving from just one-shot prompting to more agentic context engine like Spider and the other frameworks for developing context within a model so that it can be much better at contributing almost uh, multiple goes at an iteration to deliver something functional. We're also seeing a shift in observability. I know the term observability is one that we've all come to use over the past decade. It tends to mean, like, at its definition, it means the ability to understand the state of a system from outside of that system. It's what leads us to be more proactive in capturing observability information, particularly in mobile from our users. But we're starting to see a much higher focus towards action-based observability. So we're not just there to make sure an app collects data, we're collecting that data for a purpose, and that purpose is to take action to improve the app and improve the experiences we're delivering for users. Um, this has also meant that uh, we're starting to confront this question of how much time are we as developers spending on maintenance? And maintenance can mean anything, whether like Many of you, I'm sure, have can look at your current Jira backlog and say, I know that I have a ton of maintenance. Things like a long-running UI framework rewrite, an operating system update, responding to some new shifting App Store requirements, improving quality from an issue that's having significant business impact. All of these are the kind of day two messy maintenance problems that um, are taking increasing amounts of time. Surveys are telling us that mobile app developers are saying they're spending 50+% of their time on maintenance. So I think the AI era is already starting to push us into more agentic approaches, so that process of maintenance becomes, like where previously it maybe wasn't deterministic enough to automate. With AI, it has the like basic reasoning capabilities that we can get pretty far and accelerate what we can do through agents, so that we're spending less time on maintenance and spending more time on the quintessentially human things. Um, the mental model I have for this is kind of built around something from the cloud native era. There was a term during that era was coming about called pets versus cattle. For those of you who aren't familiar, like I'll just briefly go over it, but in that era, we went from having mental model of servers, which we um, carefully raised and stood up. We fed them and watered them and gave them all the upgrades and patching that we needed. If they got sick, we would treat them in place. We treated servers, we even named them, we gave them specific names. Like those of you from this server era, you remember having silly names that were all under the same theme for each individual server. That's when we treated servers like pets. And then with cloud native, we have systems that treat them more like cattle, treat them like a herd, where you don't necessarily care about each individual's one. You spawn them rapidly. If anything happens, you can shut down that container or server and rapidly move to another one. And we gave them numbers, not names. Um, I don't think this analogy perfectly fits with apps, but something similar is going to happen where essentially what we had created was a set of maintenance automation around containers and virtual machines that enabled us to spend less time managing them like pets and more time managing the system which manages them. The same thing is going to happen for maintenance of software in general, but I think particularly for mobile app because the maintenance burden is so high, that we're going to start building agentic systems around our mobile app at its core, the thing that we deliver to our users' phones, that allow us to spend less time on maintenance. And so I'm going to go into some specific concrete examples of that in the future. But I do want to talk a little bit about the other part of this, which is our ability to build new experiences because of AI. So the thing that I would challenge you, like I'm sure many of you work on apps where you have a kind of LLM chatbot that might help with discovery or answer questions or kind of like a in-app service desk for your app. Um, I think that's a experience. It's not frankly a very great one for our users. It doesn't allow the take advantage of the richness of the phone that they're looking at. And I think that there's a real opportunity for us to build transformative experiences that utilize on-device LLMs to create dynamic user experiences, customized for the user. I'll go into some specific concrete examples that I think people can take advantage of today, but I'm really excited, frankly, about uh, how truly transformative these experiences can be. And I don't think we've seen the next killer app that revolutionizes how we do messaging, for example, by really creating dynamic UIs. And I hope that somebody in this room will be the ones to create it because I think it's an exciting time to be a developer and get to build these completely different experiences than we had before. Um, this era is defined by you know, increasing non-deterministic user experiences, yes, and a way in which we can spend more time actually crafting those user experiences by spending less time on maintenance. Um, What's causing that change? Obviously, the models themselves. And I'll be honest, as an observer of this space, 2 years ago, I would have said, these models, they're great, but I'm not sure how good they're going to be in programming and hitting benchmarks for languages that don't have a huge open source corpus. They're typically trained on an open source corpus from open source repos, and that helps them. And that meant that they were probably better at Java-based languages, and in mobile that meant React Native. But maybe there aren't as many open source mobile apps, and so maybe they're not going to be as good as Dart or some other Kotlin. I found that not to be true. So for those of you who are using these, you see that all the recent iterations, whether it's Anthropic's newest one or ChatGPT's version 5, like they're getting really good at surpassing coding benchmarks. And so I don't think there's going to be any question about will the foundational models be capable of contributing code if given the right context for all the programming languages that we interact with. In addition to that, we're also seeing the kind of standardization of agents, and uh, everyone uses agents to mean a whole set of different things. I really think of it as a customized LLM workflow that has access to specific tools. So when I say agents, I'm not going to be talking about anything more sophisticated than that. These are standard things you can with all of the large language models, APIs, you can essentially program these agents, give them access to specific tools, and give them specific prompts so that they have primarily defined outputs is what you're looking for through tasks. The next one, and this really speaks to the experiences, is that operating systems, Android and iOS, are starting to give us as developers more access to be able to deploy and utilize on-device models. And today we use that for image creation, recognition, translation. But I think in the future we're going to be able to use it for user intent understanding and direct UX modification. And that's going to be really exciting when we have very customized dynamic user experiences. The last agent of change is one that has nothing to do with AI. And it's one that if you recall, and I was speaking about the phase two, I said was really important. And that's this um, clear signal that mobile is the primary digital platform of our current era. And every business has recognized that, and every business is making investments to not just copycat what they had in web on mobile, but really innovate in mobile. So the stakes are really high, and the teams that spend the least amount of time on app maintenance and the most amount of time crafting the next amazing experience are the ones that are going to win out. And I think business leaders understand that. They understand the opportunity that we have in mobile and the channel in mobile, and understand that this is not a copycatting and maintaining is enough. We actually need to differentiate in the types of experiences we deliver. That's what makes it an exciting time for developers because those are the quintessentially human things that only you can do. Okay, so how is that change actually impacting teams? And the first one is it's reshaping the structures of teams. So many of you might already have gone through a process where previously maybe your mobile organization was organized exclusively by the app platform, like iOS and Android, and you had one team kind of covering the entire surface area of the app. You're starting to see more of the uh, product team mentality that's been applied in web and microservices applied in mobile, where the ownership of the app might be split up, and there are specific kind of outcomes or experiences that each individual team owns. And that's led to this notion of a mobile platform team, which we're increasingly seeing more and more. A team who's specifically focused on how are we optimizing our investment in our mobile developers by making sure they have all the tools and systems and best practices available to them to do what I said, spend less time on maintenance and more time on crafting great experiences. The next one is around how we're detecting issues. I think there's been a big shift in focus from reactive, hey, we're waiting for app reviews or user feedback, to proactive. And that proactiveness is not just like, hey, we look at quantitative data, not just qualitative data. It also means that we're spotting those issues and taking action more quickly and making sure we have systems to take action more quickly. And that really leads into this next one, which is um, the slide says AI-driven observability. It's really like AI or agents driven by observability data. So if you think about what I described earlier of having a network of agents around your app who are helping you perform the maintenance that is maybe like lower value, you really need access to what's happening in production to be able to do that. So there are some maintenance tasks that I'm going to talk about that are really internally focused, but most of them are externally focused. And you really should think about this as optimization and using what we previously think of as kind of observability is just an ability to capture data to actually observability is an ability to capture that and action on that data, and preferably action on it without a lot of human intervention. Um, the next major change is obviously you all probably use large language models and have mandates from your organization to use them to speed up your delivery time, your cycle time. We're starting to build more tools for managing that process. What that means, A, we have uh, a lot higher velocity in our teams, but B, we have to make sure that we're still keeping the right guardrails so that we don't uh, cause detriment to our users' experiences. So there's been a lot more investment in the test scaffolding and test frameworks so that when we do have increased velocity, we're not shipping things that are bad experiences for our user. And then the last point is really one that's near and dear to my heart. I mentioned that I expect that we're going to have more deterministic user experiences, dynamic user experiences, even customized, personalized user experiences within our mobile app. What makes that a challenge to deal with is that now you don't actually know what your user experienced, and there's no way to know that without knowing directly from the device what did your user experience. And we see this all the time with chatbots, where you can't test every permutation of how a chatbot is going to respond. So you really need to know how did that respond in production, and what was the user's experience of that. And so there's been a lot higher focus on what is actually happening, how are my users actually experiencing this app, so that you have more visibility and can take action to make sure that if there is a negative experience, you correct it. Um, I have this line at the bottom that says, agentic isn't replacing engineers, it's replacing tasks. I don't know about you, but I would say, 2 years ago at the start of this AI wave, there was a lot of like, oh, we're not going to need developers anymore, and a lot of uncertainty and fear about the future of software development. I think that's largely worn off. I think what I hear from companies and from mobile developers is that really it's about reducing time spent on toil and other tasks so we can get back to the thing that we all wanted to do as developers, which is build great experiences. So I think that's largely a, a known at this point that we're not talking about not needing developers. We're talking about allowing developers to focus on the things that only humans can focus on and automate more of our work, which is something we've been doing for years as software developers. So, um, the the patterns that we're seeing, and so this is more from what I and my purview and talking to a bunch of mobile development teams here. Uh, First, there's like three different pillars. One is the development, the second is the building of agents, particularly around observability, and then the third is uh, the types of apps we're building. So in development, I'm sure you all use code agents, as I mentioned, for scaffolding and inner loop error issue and understanding code. I think is a really great use case that people are seeing. Increasingly, we're seeing that code generation take on this professionalism that I mentioned, where there's a defined structure for saying, hey, I intend to improve my app in this way, have the model build out a plan for exactly what it's going to execute, and then run that execution in a loop where it's checking to make sure that nothing's breaking as it's executing. So that kind of like I don't know what people have different terms for it, but like the context engineering of a lengthy brownfield contribution of code is becoming more standard. We're building best practices for it, and I think organizations are starting to adopt that more and more than just the one shot, like let me ask my IDE to write some code for this very small snippet. The second one is around tests and test, not just generation, but execution. And the really interesting thing for me is, for those of you who've been practicing development for a while, you know that uh, it's really easy to say, oh, we should make sure we test everything, but testing does sometimes come with a trade-off of reducing your cycle time, particularly if your like CI suite takes 4 hours to run. You got to make sure that you're running only the most essential tests for each uh, code change, because otherwise you're spending time waiting for CI, and whether it's developers or agents, that time can't be saved in any way. So one thing we're starting to see is not just test generation, but also test selection. So you're starting to see teams utilize tools that help them select the right test to run, not just like I think in previous iterations we would do that very deterministically of like if this file changes, then run these tests. But you're starting to see a lot more sophistication in making sure you're running the right tests at the right time using AI models. And then the next one is the deploying your app version through the store and preparing it for a release. So we're starting to see more agentic approaches to collecting feedback in beta environments, checking to make sure that the app's quality is sufficient before submitting to the store, making sure that you're packaging all of the things that you need to package before releasing a new app version in a systematic way. This is typically a thing that, if you all have been on mobile teams, when you're the release manager, you have to do. That's not super high value work that we're starting to see happen through AI. And then in production, you're starting to see observability allow uh, more identification of insights. So agents are pretty good at spotting insights in fields of data that, frankly, even humans kind of miss if they're just trying to look expansively. And then even alerting on accelerating issues and auto remediating. And auto remediation in mobile typically means either like that what we've seen teams do is either they're preparing your previous version as a ready rollout even after you've rolled out the next version. So kind of preparing your rollback so that if you encounter an issue, you just adjust the percentages of your rollback one to 100 quickly, or extensive use of feature flags. And one thing I'm excited about that we're working on at Luciq is the ability to be more sophisticated in your feature flag flipping based on specific targeting information. So like if a crash is only happening on certain types of devices, you can adjust features only for those types of devices. Um, and then lastly, let's talk about the experiences. And so, as I mentioned, I'm sure many of you are using the AI assistants to help discover and answer questions about your app. I think the next low-hanging fruit is anything where you have a part of your app that is asking your users to set their UI settings. So even things like dark mode or preferences in how they want certain screens to look. I think that we should be asking you're either identifying from our users' behavior or asking our users for something like a more generic statement about what they would like your app's UI to look like, and then programmatically or systematically adjusting that for them on the fly. So that's like a first step. Like I think it's in the AI era, it's strange that we ask our users to tell us what they want their user experience to look like specifically, and only then craft it for them. But you can imagine taking that even a step further, not just the settings, but understanding the intent. Examples I give is like uh, maybe I always want to travel to certain places when it's raining and after I've gotten it's raining and after I've gotten my paycheck, I want to go play basketball. So maybe that's like a thing that your app can now understand the intent of your users based on a whole variety of factors, and then customize the user experience so that it's not like, oh, I have to go select things. It immediately prompts you for specific actions. And so I think the user experience, if you think about what you could use on-device models for, they could essentially build dynamic user experiences on the fly. Everything I just said is not possible today because the operating systems aren't going to let you dynamically generate code into your user's app without some sort of control. But it's where I definitely see the operating systems themselves enabling us as developers is to build more customized UX based on on-device models within certain parameters that they'll provide. You already start seeing that in both the operating systems enabling you to deploy and interact with models, on-device models. The next thing is going to be having more patterns for dynamically adjusting the UX based on that model input. Um, okay, so this architecture that I'm describing, particularly around how we build apps, is really like that model I mentioned with um, pets and cattle. It's really about building scaffolding around your app, thinking about your app as this central package or bundle, and then building agents around them. And there's lots of standard types of agents that you can progress, but this architecture is not it's not new in the sense that infrastructure and hosted software has kind of built deterministic operations automation. It's like IT automation and IT ops in general is built around this model. But really, I think with LLMs, we have an ability to apply this not just for infrastructure, but for apps themselves, and particularly for mobile apps. Um, this concept is really why I believe that we are headed towards an era of zero maintenance apps, where we're spending a lot, going from 50% of our time on maintenance to 0% of our time on maintenance, and instead focusing on building the systems that allow us to maintain instead of performing the maintenance ourselves. And this is, like I've mentioned, going to free up the time of all of us as developers and our organizations to focus on, the building the amazing experiences that our users are hungry for. And that can happen, uh, there's a couple of different suggestions here for ways that that can happen, and many of them are ways that Luciq already enables. But I'm going to talk a little bit about some concrete steps that you can do as a mobile development team starting today to get started on this journey. Um, the first one, I think, is first like reimagining your app as more than just its bundle. And that's going to take some leadership alignment, I think. You need to make sure that your team is enabled and empowered to craft the agentic work, do away with some of the maintenance tasks that you do, and really understand what those maintenance tasks are so that you can prioritize them. Um, but an easy first one is like you've probably all heard of tools like Dependabot, but you can build a Dependabot yourself, have it be triggered by dependency package updates and immediately propose changes. I think building a tool like a Dependabot in your own organization will prove out that you can build the agentic workflows that you need to in order to take some of the next steps. The next ones would be, like test coverage, making sure that you're developing tests automatically alongside code using agents. And then, as I mentioned, test selection, I think is a really important uh, kind of like next capability. Then the next one is, I really think is observability. So, we spend a lot of time thinking about the quality of apps and being able to glean insights from your observability data and then even propose real fixes. And this is something that Lucic as a product does with our observability data. Will significantly reduce the amount of time you spend triaging, assigning, debugging, and then shipping changes to production for things like crashes. Um, that also applies to the release management process. So if you're not using feature flags or some way to kind of programmatically adjust the user's experience on the fly, it really helps to do that because then your agent's answer isn't let me propose a fix and put it into a pipeline that's not going to ship for 2 months. It can be let me immediately shift or flip a feature flag that will prevent users from having that experience until I deliver the fix. Um, but the real thing I think that is going to be a challenge for all of us in mobile is that this is going to require us to expand our programming horizons beyond just the core languages that we use to develop apps and become proficient in creating agentic systems, which means we need to be more proficient in data pipelines, AI pipelines, and typically these agentic systems are built in backend technologies, like unless you're a Kotlin developer. But I do think that going back to our roots, if we're developers of being like um, more technologists than developers, really understanding these technologies and understanding that one way you can contribute to spending less time on maintenance is to actually help craft and drive the crafting of these systems within your organization, the better. Um, the last thing I'll say is I mentioned that I gleaned a bunch of this information from talking to mobile teams and bleeding edge mobile teams that are using AI in their mobile development today. Um, I just want to highlight that this is happening, and many of you are thinking, "Oh, that Kenny, that's nice, kind of pie in the sky," but my organization's not ready for that. Um, you need to get ready quickly because if you're not, these other companies are going to be quickly outpacing you. So we already see companies, whether they're Lucic customers or not, utilizing auto crash fixing agents, building test generation, automatically healing their apps, responding proactively with feature flag adjustments based on poor app quality, being more building agentic systems around what their app maintenance requirements are. And so, if you're not doing that today, just remember like this is a change. It's a change that requires a little bit of shift in a mindset. we're not talking about replacing our jobs. We're talking about replacing a set of tasks that aren't quintessentially human, and that we need to build continuous operation systems, and that if we're not doing it very quickly, we're going to see competitors in our space who are going to be able to move at a speed and deliver experiences that we're not able to. So I highly encourage you to get started on this. Hopefully, this gives you some starting point building blocks for doing it. And as mentioned, this is something that we've been working on for some time and already have many of the core capabilities in Luciq today. So, with that, thank you. You have my email address on this slide, but you can also find me on LinkedIn. I'm Kenny Johnston. You just search Kenny Johnston Lucic, you'll find me. And I am happy to take any and all questions that you might have.
Awesome. Thanks, Kenny. We do have a question already in the
Sure.
Q&A tab. So let's see. This person is asking, if we enable Smart Resolve, what does that mean for the data? Does that allow Lucid to use our data in which ways? Yeah.
Yeah, I'll say we don't train on any of our customer data. If you do enable Smart Resolve, there's like two ways that you can utilize Smart Resolve. The first one is where, independent of what is happening in your code, we can make suggestions on the root cause based on the patterns we're seeing in the stack trace. So that can be helpful and can get you to like, oh, this will at least be a starting point for me for how to reproduce and debug this crash. If you give us code, we can go so far as to then analyze that code and make suggestions for specific code changes that would prevent that crash in the future. These do go like the content of that does go through a large language model, but it's not used for any training purposes.
Awesome. Thanks.
Yeah.
Yeah, if are there any other questions, feel free to put that in the Q&A tab. But someone did ask about the recording and meeting notes. So yes, someone from our team will be reaching out to you shortly and share the recording with you as well. Are there any other questions that we can answer? Oh, okay, so there's another question. Do you use any release management tooling like Runway?
We don't actually. We have some capabilities that are very similar to Runway in at Lucic. So yeah, we have what we call release management that automatically progresses your app's release based on quality signals, and then also conversely prevents or adjusts your app release based on if there are negative quality signals. So yeah, we don't use it internally, and in some sense, we're overlapping with them in that we provide a similar functionality.
Cool. Well, if there are no more questions, again, you have Kenny's email right here, so if you want to ask him any questions, you can do that later. Otherwise, we'll send the recording to you after. And yeah, thank you all for attending this webinar.
Yeah, thank you all. I'm excited to see what y'all build. Have a great day.
Bye, everyone.